Okay, welcome to Unit 1. In the first of the two videos that we will allot to this unit, the first unit would be specific to Chapter 1 of the assigned book. Here, we try to understand the basics of critical thinking and try to see what is the rationale for learning critical thinking. Now, Einstein seemed to have said that education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think. And this course is about thinking and thinking well. And we'll talk about how to do so. Okay, this is the quick outlook of what we'll do in this video lecture. First, we'll talk about the need for critical thinking. Then we'll try to define critical thinking. Then we discuss whether it can be learned, if there is any evidence to suggest that. Then we talk about the relationship or lack of it between critical thinking and intelligence. Then we'll talk about the schema, and we'll end this video lecture by introducing you to two systems of thinking. So let's get started with the first outcome of the need for the critical thinking. Let's look at some examples. There are 6% of Americans believe the moon landing was staged, according to a survey in 2009. And 20% of adults thought that sun revolves around the Earth and that Earth is flat. So uh, this shows that there's something wrong in how we form our knowledge or beliefs. This is one example, and we can look at other examples. For instance, power bands. These are called power balance wristbands. They're supposed to somehow improve your energy flexibility and balance. The price is $30, but it has been very popular, sold over 2.5 million products, um, and uh, it was endorsed by an athlete. But there was no evidence to suggest that it was effective. I strongly suggest you to read the book. The point I'm trying to make from these two examples is that human reasoning is not up to the mark. Humans are known not to be good reasoners, and our decision-making skills are not reliable either, right? They are not rational. We are susceptible to fake news, which is wrong information. Disinformation is misinformation with an intention to change your behavior. Then there are lots of biased information consumption where we look for information that matches our beliefs. And we'll talk more about this as we go through this series of video lectures. All these suggest that we as a human are not equipped with the capacity to be able to think critically about the information presented to us. And if you think about it, it's kind of makes sense. Why? Because we, when through evolution, developed a system that is more quick than accurate, more automatic than what do you say, precise. And this quick automatic perceptual system or cognitive system was developed for our survival, current world. The kind of decisions we make and the kind of information we are given doesn't need us to necessarily be automatic or quick. In fact, it requires us to slow down. So it's ironic that on the one hand, our system has developed to be quick and automatic, but to be an effective evaluator of the information, you need to actually, as I was telling earlier, the kind of evolution we went through doesn't fit the kind of world we are in now. For instance, according to a report, New York Times Weekly contains more information than you actually experience in your lifetime. There are other reports suggest that average humans gets exposed to a lot of information. The question is, do you slow down? Do you evaluate? Do you critically think about this information? Or you just use this information like any other perceptual information you use to make quick decisions, like walking, talking, reading? Too much of information requires us to not to be automatic, but to be more controlled in our thinking. One problem with the presence of too much of information is that we don't know which information is reliable versus which is not, right? Because there is abundance of information. We don't know which one is credible, right? And it's as if the internet has democratized the knowledge so everybody can learn information from everywhere, and anybody can put the information on the internet for anyone to consume. And the question is, how do you know if this information is correct? That's one of the skills that you have to develop as a critical thinker, is to now take the information as it comes to you by the face value, but to actually check the credibility of the information before you take it into your system. Critical thinking is the only way we can bring about a change that would be helpful for the future generations, and also to develop a sustainable, peaceful world. If you look at the immediate benefits of it, you can see that most of the employers want the skills that we will learn in this class specific to critical thinking. The system of democracy that we are proud of would work only when the people that make up that system are responsible in how they make decisions, which requires you to use the critical thinking skills. And at least for that reason, I hope you stay tuned for learning these skills in the upcoming video lecture. Now that we talked about the need for critical thinking, the next question is, what is critical? Now, I want you to think back to the framework that we discussed earlier, where both thinking and knowledge are dynamically related. Thinking is a process of using knowledge to make sense of the new information. In doing so, you're also updating the knowledge base, right? Now, process of thinking can be deliberate, conscious, effortful, and goal-directed, or it could be purposeless, unreasonable, automatic. There is no one clear definition of critical thinking that you will encounter. Research reviewing literature on critical thinking come up with these features. Thinking that is more purposeful, reasoned, goal-directed, and uses words like cognitive skills, strategies for desirable outcomes. It also talks about the attitude and approach to information. So in the next slide, we will come to some broader definition. Just by looking at its name, we know that it's a form of thinking, right? It is a form of thinking, but this form of thinking is critical. So the question is, what is critical about critical thinking then? One way to look at the critical aspect of the critical thinking is that it is a form of thinking. In that sense, it is a process, right? With a purpose, right? And this process of thinking is critical in the sense that for whatever reason you are thinking about something, you have some evaluative aspect to it. Meaning that, let's say you are going through a thinking process of making a decision to buy a car. So you went through some thinking process and come up with an outcome, right? The evaluative aspect of the critical thinking is that you will reflect on the outcome. And when you reflect on the outcome, the approach is what is so you're looking at, okay, is this a good decision? Is it a good outcome? What are good things about it? What are bad things about it? So you're kind of looking at reflecting on your own decisions you've made with the intention to improve it. That's one evaluative aspect. The other evaluative aspect is not looking at just the evaluating the product, the outcome itself, but also evaluating the process that went into the outcome. Question is this reasoning process reasonable enough or logical enough for me to rely on it? So there is this aspect of metacognition. Metacognition is the word we'll use in this class, and we'll come back to this construct later on, evaluating your own thinking. So that's the meta part. Cognitive aspect where you are evaluating constantly the product that is the result of the thinking as a process, and also evaluating the thinking process itself. Now, there is one particular definition from 60s, and we'll talk more about that in the next slide. Okay, so coming to the definition I was referring to, and I want to confirm whether it is Bertrand Russell or somebody else who was quoted as saying this or referring to this potential definition. And I was unable to, I actually have the book that is being referred to that's in my office. So, but I just want to tell you that how consciously I'm aware of the credibility of the information and how I'm sharing that information with you, saying that I will record again additional information about this, if not right now, later on by the time you watch this video. Because this is Bertrand Russell, who is a very well-known philosopher, logician, and whatnot, and he got Nobel Prize for Literature, and I'm a big fan of his and read multiple books, and I wanted to double check this before. For now, I want you to assume that according to him, there is this one definition of critical thinking, which is involved with these aspects. Now, Remember we talked about the framework of thinking and knowledge? Those things are here. So the critical thinking involves, it's like an equation, thinking skill plus knowledge plus the attitude. So to be a good critical thinker, you need to have the critical thinking skills, the cognitive skills, which we will learn in this class, and a certain type of knowledge, then a certain kind of attitude. Okay. And attitude here refers to like disposition, which we'll talk more about in the next slide. So having said that, right, the critical thinking skill has the thinking skill part, right, and the knowledge part and the attitude with the goal to overcome the fallacies or the biases. So when you think humans are not rational and how that can affect the decisions we make. So a constant goal as a critical thinker is to make sure that you overcome such fallacies. And you can overcome such fallacies when you learn about those fallacies, which we will do in this class. And then that's related to the processes part, right? You're using thinking skills with a goal to overcome the fallacies. Then related to knowledge is with the goal to understand the information at a very deeper and meaningful level. So you're not just knowing the information for the knowing sake, but you have actually thought thoroughly through the information when you learn information. And we'll talk about strategies as to how you can actually internalize information and make sure that the information stays there for long-term retention and knowledge. Then comes the attitude. This attitude involves, remember we talked earlier in the last slide about the critical thinking being evaluative of the process of thinking and evaluative of the product of thinking, right? So that is the attitude this attitude refers to. So attitude to evaluate the outcome and the reasoning behind the outcome, but also comes with attitude in general, referring to your dispositions, the kind of mindset you're supposed to have, things of that sort that we'll talk about in the next. So coming to the dispositions, I really want you to read the entirety of the description provided in the book because that gives you a comprehensive understanding of the attitudes and dispositions that a critical thinker needs to have to be a critical thinker. But I'm going to briefly talk about some of the characteristics. The one being persistence, meaning that when you encounter a complex task, again, this has to do with how our human system has evolved to be more quick than precise. For you to be precise, you need to be patient and not let go of the thing that you have taken up, but to actually be perseverant throughout till you finish accomplishing what you wanted to accomplish and why you're using the skills of thinking for a given task. Then the disposition to think right? In a planned fashion, meaning again, it comes to this controlled fashion. Think about all the steps. Think about the planful thinking. Like think about this was, this was, this was. Try to incorporate all perspectives related to the content that you're trying to think critically about. Then the other idea is that don't be rigid, be flexible and be open-minded. Most of the times, this is where people get stuck, right? You cannot be a critical thinker if you cannot be open to other possibilities, right? That's where the evaluative component that we talked about comes in, where we say that you have to evaluate your own thinking process. For that, you need to be flexible. For that, you need to be open-minded to accept that this could be a potentially wrong process or whatever you came up with is absolutely doesn't make sense. You have to be flexible enough and also will. You should be willing enough to, that's when you learn. Learning, beginning of learning is knowing what you don't know so you can fill that gap. Now, the next question is, or the next outcome for this video lecture is to answer this question, can critical thinking be learned? Well, the answer is yes, and that's why we have this course, and that's why you plan to take this course, right? So there is empirical research to show that people can gain in the improve their skills, but in a very abstract fashion. That's why taking as many courses related to logic would be very beneficial. Now, coming to the next outcome, which is to talk about the relationship between critical thinking and intelligence. Now, again, I keep reiterating to go back and read the chapter to get a comprehensive thing. Mine is a quick, very brief summary by focusing on the frameworks and to kind of take you through this learning process, but you need to connect more. Remember, we talked about how learning new information is internalizing it, and internalization requires you to make a lot of connections. I am giving you a primer to start these connections, and you reading it, thinking about it, working on it would actually facilitate these connections to be much deeper and long term. So there is this, and there are different kinds of general intelligence. There is general intelligence versus multiple intelligences. There can be intelligent of one kind, not the other kind. And having a measure to test your intelligence and give you a number is is not a good way of assessing intelligence. And when there is no good way of assessing intelligence, using intelligence as a way to decide whether you are not a critical thinker or can you be a critical thinker would be inappropriate, because the very definition of intelligence or the very idea of intelligence is is very unclear, and the ways of measuring are unreliable. Everybody's intelligent to an extent that you can process information. If you're taking this class, you're already intelligent. The question is, are you a critical thinker? Meaning that can you be super intelligent or just intelligent or and still not be critical thinkers? Of course. The world is full of intelligent people, and they are not necessarily critical thinkers. Otherwise, we would not have had so many historic events of issues where things happen that should not have happened. Now, my aim is to be very neutral in my discussions about the topic because I want everyone to learn critical thinking. I would never talk about my views about any of the topics. The discussion would only circle around the examples given in the book and the kind of thinking that goes behind these examples I give you, not the content itself. Content will change, but the method involved in critical thinking is what is important for this class. So if we move on to the next slide and look at the assessing intelligence thing, right? There are two constructs, the reliability and validity. Reliability is the consistency of a measure to give the same result over and over again. So if you take a test now and take this somewhere at some time later, if it gives you the same result, then it's reliable. Now, most of the measures are reliable in the sense that consistent in giving you the same number. But the question comes is the validity of it, meaning that is it actually capturing what it says it is capturing? If the intelligent test is supposed to capture the intelligence and it is consistently giving you the same numbers, it's very important that is it valid? Is it measuring what is measuring? Okay, now we'll move on to our next learning outcome, which is schema. Schema is a very interesting construct. We'll talk more about schema in the next video lecture when we talk about memory, but I'll give you a brief idea about schema in this. A schema is the generalized knowledge about situations. Let me give you an example. Let's say you go to McDonald's. What do you do first? It's not drive through. Okay, you park the car, you enter, what do you do next? You go and sit at the table and wait for the, no, right? Where do you go? Okay, you go to the counter, okay, give your order. I can hear you. Yeah. That's your favorite. Okay. Then what do you do? Pay. Okay. Then stand here. Okay. Then wait for your number or name to be called. Okay. What do you do next? You pick up your order and go and find a table, sit and eat. Okay. Now, what do you do if you go to a dining restaurant like Applebee's? Do you go to the counter and order? No. Oh, okay. What do you do then? Oh, you enter and stand there, wait for them till they come and ask you and take you to a table, then give you the menu, ask you what do you want for beverages, then come back to take the order. You make the order, you get the, okay, got it. So here's the thing. How do you know this? Do you remember when you learned how to order at McDonald's? How to order at Applebee's? How these two are different? Can you give me one instance of when you learned? You cannot. You don't even try. So the point I'm trying to make is that This generalized knowledge is a kind of knowledge that you will gather after you've experienced events or situations multiple times in multiple contexts. So you've gone to Applebee's, you've gone to McDonald's, you've gone to different kinds of restaurants, and over time, you've kind of understood the patterns of it. And these patterns resulted in creating a generalized knowledge about the world, situations. This is called situational knowledge. Situational generalized knowledge, that is schema. We have schemas for restaurants. We have schemas for movies. We have schemas for weddings. We have schemas for classrooms. This dictate how, what we expect in those situations. And this will also help us behave in certain ways that you're supposed to behave in those. So that active organization of our past experiences is schema. And if you want to learn more, take my cognitive class. We discuss a lot about this. And what happens with this is that when you enter that situation again, this information gets activated and that will help you understand. Remember, new information, you make sense of it by using old information. The old information here would be networks. Of course, there's an issue with it. The problem is your understanding of your new experiences is as good as your past experiences, right? So, but again, these are very powerful. We'll talk more about it in the next video lecture when we talk about the memory, because schemas are a part of long-term memory. We'll talk about that. Schemas influence your experiences, and your experiences create schemas. That's the irony. Okay, so the last outcome for this video lecture is to talk about the two systems of thinking. Remember, we've been talking about critical thinking as more effortful, more thought out, slow, effortful process. Well, we'll talk about two forms of thinking as presented by Daniel Kahneman, the only cognitive psychologist who has received, or a psychologist, if I'm not wrong, who received a Nobel Prize, but in economics. That's interesting. According to Daniel Kahneman, there are two kinds of thinking, if you may, and he calls them two systems. System one thinking and system two thinking. System one thinking is automatic, effortless, more like is rapid. It's more like your intuition, and you do things. Whatever you do things quickly that happen in the realm of system one. So all the biases that we talked about, or the fallacies that you learn that you have to avoid, come as a result of system one thinking, which is rapid, automatic. Okay. System two thinking is more effortful, logical, analytical, and slow, and it is controlled. To actually explain that in detail, I want you to actually try to answer this question. Again, a bat and a ball cost $1.10. Bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? What's your answer? Okay, did you say 10 cents? If you said that, you used your intuition, your system one thinking, right? I tried to put this here to kind of hide the answer, but there was no need for it. It's okay. So the common incorrect answer is 10 cents. Okay. And the correct answer is 5 cents. Well, you might be thinking like, what? Okay, hold on. So a bat and a ball cost is a ball. Okay. Has $1.10. A bat costs $1 more than the ball. So bat's cost is $1 more than the ball cost. Now, with this information here, so bat is equal to 1 plus balls plus this existing ball, okay, would give you $1.10, right? So if you bring this here, then it will be 2 balls is equal to $1.10 minus $1, which is 10 cents, but it doesn't end here, right? For one ball, it is 10 cents over 2, which is 0.05. But the intuitive answer, when you use system 2, is 10 cents, not 5 cents, because that's quick, not control. That's an error of system 1 thinking. But you can be saying 0.05 or 5 cents equally faster only when you become an expert in this type of question. So that's where the difference is between experts and novices. We are novices in most of our contexts in our lives. We are expert in one and we are jacks of all trades, right? So when you go to a doctor, he is an expert. He's gone through very meticulously the process of logical thinking required to be a doctor and spent countless hours and years in learning those skills. So that expertise will result in turning this slow, effortful, critical thinking into a quicker one. So practice makes one perfect. So even though critical thinking is effortful, right? In a given context, you can be a more critical thinker by using your system one. For that, you need to practice. Another aspect of the fast and slow thinking has to do with the fast thinking and how our fast thinking, which is from one thinking where you think automatically, comes at a cost, not only because it's not necessarily more precise, right? But also because this fast thinking can be influenced by factors that don't need to be. It doesn't need to be involved in making a decision. For instance, the emotions can influence your decision sometimes, which truly speaking should not, right? When you're taking a decision, the decision should be based on the given. So you're coming with a solution and make a decision. But emotions, as you all know, you are more emotional in a given situation, the less rational your decision is. So our rationality is bounded by our affective state. Affective, you're referring to emotional state. In fact, there is one study, and again, we don't have a lot of time to go over all these in the chapter. I want you to go back and read the chapter. But it talks about a study where participants would be given warm, right, or cold coffee, and participants with warm coffee actually evaluate the other person as warmer compared to participants who actually were given cold coffee. So the state of your body can also influence your thinking and your decision making. In this case, the decision was evaluation of the person. And there are other examples like this. So, and again, refer you to go back and read it from the book chapter. Okay. Now we come to the end. We talked about the need for critical thinking. I hope you agree that there is a need for it. And I hope you get a general idea of what critical thinking is. And then you also, I hope, agree that it can be learned. And we want you to not define intelligence as an inborn thing. I want you to think about intelligence as a continuous process of growing. And if you're taking this class, you're already intelligent. The question is, are you a critical thinker or not? You can be one and continue to be one. And when you continue to work on it consciously by taking courses like these, and there are several others. And when we talked about schema, then we talked about fast and slow thinking, and we said that critical thinking is the slow thinking. So what is the conclusion? Well, critical thinking is essential in this information world. It requires you to learn thinking skills, maintain and some dispositions, and work on developing your knowledge, right? Understand how your mind works and avoid the mistakes that it is susceptible to, right? And try to apply these skills on a continuous basis so that you can be a good critical thinker. I hope you like this journey of becoming a critical thinker, and stay tuned, and don't forget to work on any assignments for this unit, but also keep reading. See you in the next video.